Hi, my name is Sharona Halickman, and I'm broadcasting live from Jerusalem. I'm going to be talking about Shabbat Zachor. Today I'm going to take you on two spiritual journeys in the context of Shabbat Zachor. One is that a wrongful action can lead to a bad reaction, even many years later. And the other is that a wrongful action can also have a tikkun. There can be a correction in the future. So let's first talk about how a wrongful action could lead to punishment. The Avot, our forefathers, were wrong when they were trying to figure out who the spiritual heir would be. And their wives, the Imahot, the foremothers, were correct in who the spiritual heirs would be. When Yitzchak had to bless his children, he thought that Esav would be the heir. And Rivka knew that it would be Yaakov. Esav didn't have the proper character traits. And the Midrash and the Agadah bring a lot of Midrashim with this idea, as well as Eliezer HaKalir, the liturgical poet. This Shabbat, many congregations will read a liturgical poem about Shabbat Zachor. Zachor, remember Esav, who caused Abraham to die before his time. With murder, thievery, and adultery, Esav frightened him. He diminished 5 years from Abraham's life. Zachor, remember, the one whose way was the reverse of an honest man, and who was a stranger to truth, who blinded his father with incense of idolatry. He planned inwardly to be cruel to his brother. With Rivka, she specifically says to Yaakov, listen to my voice. This is similar to when God tells Abraham, whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her voice. This is the voice of prophecy. The Imahot understood who the spiritual heirs would be. And although Rivka was right, the way that she went about it was not correct to send Yaakov in to trick his father. And this caused Yaakov to suffer greatly. It may even have caused his descendants to suffer greatly up until today. And we see this from the idea of Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. What happens to the fathers happens to the children. The hatred of Esav came about and continues with Amalek, his descendants. In the Remember prayer, we see, in this liturgical poem, we see one more idea. Remember Esav, from whom blossomed Amalek. So we see from here that they mention that Amalek comes from Esav, and that's also very clear in the Tanakh. So Amalek is the grandson of Esav. Is it a coincidence that the descendants of Yaakov suffered by the hands of the descendants of Esav, of Amalek? When Esav heard his father's words, that he'd already given the blessing to Yaakov, it says, Vayitzak tza'aka gdola umara. He let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry. Esav let out an exceedingly great and bitter cry. Is it a coincidence that years later in Megillat Esther, Mordechai, the descendant of Yaakov, suffered at the hands of Haman, Amalek, the descendant of Esav? And when Mordechai hears that Haman is about to destroy the Jewish people, he lets out a similar cry, Vayizak ze'aka gdola umara. He also went out in the city and cried out bitterly. There's a parallelism. Esav screamed Tza'aka gdola umara sounds like Mordechai screamed Ze'aka gdola umara. And according to Yalkut Shimoni in the Midrash, Mordechai asked, how can you do this to me? Esav screamed out, and you answered him. Now that Esav's descendant, Amalek, Haman, wants to destroy us, you need to help us out. Now let's see how a wrongful act can have a tikkun, how there can be a correction later on. In the Haftarah for Shabbat Zachor, we read about Shaul. Shaul ben Kish ish Yemini, King Saul. And he fought Amalek, and he was told not to take the spoils, yet he did take of the spoils, and he was punished for that. Mordechai is also fighting Amalek, Haman ha'agagi. Mordechai is a descendant of Shaul, as we read in the beginning of the Megillah. Mordechai ben Yair ben Shim'i ben Kish ish Yemini. But Mordechai doesn't take the spoils of Amalek, even though he was allowed to. The Jewish people do not take the spoils, and this is mentioned 3 times to accentuate that fact. They did not take the spoils. They made a tikkun for where Shaul failed. Right? Shaul failed to kill Agag as well. He failed to kill the leader, the king of Amalek. And yet Mordechai and Esther succeed in this way by making sure that Haman and his descendants are killed. So we see a tikkun that was done here. Now we each have to ask ourselves, how can we make a tikkun? How can we make a correction for the wrongdoings of the past? Shabbat Shalom.